Good morning, and welcome to my corner of the multiverse. This is the Salty Goddess Podcast. I'm Margaret, and welcome back, everyone. Here at the Salty Goddess Podcast, we create confidence and competence. We'll call out chaos with class and occasionally drag dysfunction into the light by its emotionally evasive little ankles. Every once in a while, we've got to do that. I'm Margaret, and I'm so happy that you've joined me for your hump day guilty pleasure. So, loving my corner of the multiverse lately. It's been absolutely crazy with activity. Be sure that you don't miss out on that activity. Be sure to follow, subscribe, download, like, comment, interact, send me a message, tell me how much you're enjoying everything, ask a question. Often your comments and your questions end up being the topic of another episode later on down the line. So don't be shy, friends. Don't be shy. Don't be shy. So today we're going to begin another 3-arc series, or a 3-part arc, if you will. And we're going to, try to handle this little issue somebody else brought up for me. And this is not a diagnostic conversation. So I'm not giving out, mental hygiene advice. I'm not giving out any medical care here. So let's make sure that we understand that. I have to make that disclaimer right at the beginning because I am a licensed nurse practitioner. So we don't want anybody thinking that I'm doling out medicine over the airwaves, okay? Because that's not what's happening here. So be sure y'all keep yourselves calm about this, okay? But we are going to talk about avoidant behavior patterns. I'm not going to say that you have a personality disorder. I'm not going to say that your ex is a narcissist, or anybody who doesn't text you back in 6 minutes or less is being emotionally unavailable. Calm yourselves down a little bit. But we are going to talk about the very human, very common, very sneaky ways that people avoid discomfort, because that's what avoidant behavior patterns are. Individuals avoid engaging in certain activities, conversations, groups, etc., because it's how they avoid discomfort. And they'll make up another name for it. Like, I don't know, they're an introvert, or, I that's not really my jam. I'm just, no, I'm not going to partake. Oftentimes, avoidant behavior looks like someone's being busy, or that they're super independent, i.e. they won't ask for assistance. They may, appear extremely calm on the surface, but underneath, they're freaking out. It looks like they might be private, i.e., they don't share a lot of their personal existence with you. They may appear to be like Dr. Spock, or I should say Mr. Spock, actually, and that they're logical, or that they're, just flying above the fray. They don't want to have anything to do with drama, so they're just going to keep their nose out of it. And sometimes, my darlings, it looks like a fully grown adult with excellent vocabulary, a gorgeous color-coded calendar system, and the inability and the capacity to say that something has hurt you. Okay, without, trying to run out of the room, maybe through a window or something. So we're going to define what avoidant behaviors are. We're going to talk about why people develop them. And then what is the benefit of avoidant behaviors for that person that actually utilizes them? And, this way you can recognize whether avoidant behavior patterns are sitting at your table, drinking your whiskey and quietly sabotaging your life while they're trying to make out like it's, just good manners. So, as you know, in our 3 episode arcs, the first one is assessment. So in other words, it's a giving definition and understanding for what the situation is that we're discussing. The second episode is where we audit ourselves, or audit thyself and thy courts. And then the third is action. What action can you take? Because, acknowledgement and doing nothing about it, as I've said in the past, it's performative. Okay, so it's how you remain stuck. It's how you don't take responsibility because you're like, well, yeah, I know what it is. I haven't had time, whatever. And understand that when I talk about you auditing thyself and thy court, somebody actually mentioned to me last week, they're like, it sounds really snobbish, stuck up, and self-aggrandizing when you say throne room, the court, the moat. Friends, if by now you haven't figured this out about me, when I'm talking about a queendom or a kingdom, we all, our existence is our queendom or kingdom. Our home is our castle. So when I'm talking about that, I want you to understand that when I say I, or this is where I would put them in my, do they get to come into the throne room? Are they just sitting in court? Do they go to the gate? I fully expect you have the same, castle, queendom, kingdom, throne room, etc. This is not me saying I'm above anyone else. So I want to make that perfectly clear. I am not coming on this podcast every week and going, I'm so much better than everyone else. You should all just listen to me. That is not my stance. That's not my stance. My stance is, I wish that I had learned most of this shit in my teens, my early 20s. I can't imagine what would have been different about my life if I had spent my most valuable currency, which is time, understanding these things and believing in them. Because trust me, this is important shit. And time is your most valuable currency. So don't waste it on projects, people, things that give you a shitty ROI. That is my overreaching, overarching, message to everybody. Time. You cannot get it back. You cannot make more of it. You cannot borrow it. You cannot steal it. So spend that currency wisely. And remember, we have no idea how many springs, summers, autumns, and winters we will have. 55 is how many my father had. And I'm 3 beyond him at this point. I'm 58. So it is a commodity and should be treated as such. Not treating it as a commodity and as your most valuable currency is disrespectful to yourself. All right? So, get to handling that account and taking care of that most valuable currency. So let's get back to avoidant behavioral patterns. What are they? These are actually strategies that people will engage or utilize to distance themselves from discomfort. And what I mean by discomfort, that discomfort can be emotional, relational, professional, psychological, social, anytime that you feel uncomfortable, unsafe, overwhelmed, or embarrassed, uncertain, or even, threatened by a situation, a person, or a thing, you will move away from it. Now, I'm not going to say that avoidant behavior patterns are always bad. Sometimes avoidance is actually adaptive. You walk down a dark road and your body is going off like bells and whistles, right? Telling you something's not right here. Something's not right. So that distance that you make between yourself and that dark alley, it is avoidance, but it's discernment, right? So, and the same thing is true if someone around you is dangerous, unstable, abusive, manipulative, exploitative, emotionally reckless. Distance then is not considered avoidance. It's discernment. It's understanding that something here is going to be injurious to me. I must avoid it. But we're not talking about that. All right? We're not talking about your nervous system having the good sense to understand that there's danger down a dark alley. We're talking about avoidance. Avoidance that becomes automatic, excessive, chronic, and ultimately costly. Avoidance that shows up when the situation actually requires honesty, presence, courage, follow-through, vulnerability, accountability, or repair. Sometimes the person engaging in avoidant behavior patterns can sound like this. I don't want to talk about it. No, I'm just busy. Oh, I forgot. I'll deal with that later. It's not a big deal. I don't need any help. I'm fine. I'm not good at explaining feelings. I'm not good at feelings. I just don't do drama, so no. I'm doing my best to keep my peace. I don't owe anyone an explanation about anything. Now, have you heard those before? Bet you have. Have you used those before? Truthfully, some of those statements can absolutely be true. And avoidant behavioral patterns, they love borrowing the language of boundaries, borrowing the language of peace and maturity, of independence and professionalism, of self-care. And if you're not careful, avoidance will dress itself up and be your partner for the night. Start making some serious decisions as if it belongs there. And avoidant behavioral patterns, they're not always obvious. They may include a person avoiding difficult conversations, avoiding being vulnerable, avoiding commitment, avoiding making decisions or giving feedback, asking for assistance, or even sometimes in relationships, avoiding intimacy for fear of rejection, for fear of their feelings being hurt, things like that. They want to avoid being seen or having responsibility. They want to avoid conflict. They may want to avoid, believe it or not, success because the risk of failure is too great, which is why they also avoid uncertainty or making plans. Okay. avoiding grief, because that means that you cared too much. They will even avoid joy, happiness, anticipation, excitation. Because when you are anticipating and happy and excited, that shows others that you have something to lose. And they will avoid goals and decisions and successes because attempting to achieve those things creates risk of failure. Risk of failure may require them to ask for assistance, or the failure they think when and if they fail, that is like damage to their image. Connecting with other people creates risk. Visibility creates risk. Success creates risk, because then you're expected to, proceed at that level continuously, right? Loving someone creates a ton of risk. Leadership also creates risk, and so does healing. So when you've been the victim of any kind of physical, emotional, verbal, psychological trauma and abuse, healing creates major risks. It requires you to be vulnerable, to show weakness. It may include losing certain close relationships. So the moment that you admit that you want something, the moment that you achieve something, you now have things to lose. And having things to lose means you're vulnerable. And for those with avoidant behavior patterns, those feelings are unacceptable, intolerable. So to avoid that fear, they'll withdraw, delay, deflect, over-explain, minimize, ghost, shut down, become unavailable, and unreachable. They don't see those behaviors as being avoidant. They feel it is necessary to protect them. They think that that makes them safe. And that's the wild part. Because avoidance doesn't feel like fear from the inside. Sometimes it feels like relief. Sometimes it feels like safety. And safety and relief are so very seductive. Absolutely seductive. So I've already intimated the fact that avoidance, it is a protection strategy, right? So before we start slinging judgment at people like, confetti at a party, most avoidant behavior began as protection. And throughout the years, months, directly or indirectly, the individual has learned that, look how safe I remain when I don't engage. They learned that their feelings were inconvenient and stepped on and ignored anyway, so why show them to anyone? They learned that conflict would be explosive. They learned that being honest was not respected, no, usually punished. Okay. And, being open about needing someone almost always led to disappointment and abandonment. They learned that being visible makes them a target. And that target means there's scrutiny. Okay. And they learned that success created pressure that they hadn't learned how to manage. So you'll often hear people say, oh, I'm humble. I don't talk about those things, or I'm not looking for accolades. I'm not looking for applause. And they also learned that when they asked for assistance, it came with strings attached. It came with shame for needing something, came with lectures and ridicule. Why would you ask anybody for assistance if there was strings attached to it, that there was shame or lectures or ridicule? Like, so you made a financial error and you needed to borrow money. A lot of people make financial errors. Nobody should be shamed for that. And things shouldn't get thrown back in your face if there was assistance. Now, if you're fully disrespecting the assistance, that's a different story. That's not the kind of stuff I'm talking about. But genuine assistance, and you learned from learned the lesson of better money management or whatever you needed to learn, that's good enough. And honestly, anybody who's going to assist you, but there's strings attached, what's wrong with them? There shouldn't be strings attached. All right? And they learned that being close to somebody often resulted in unpredictable outcomes. So they figured out through the years that being easy and low maintenance actually earned them a lot of approval from the people around them. So their system adapted. And adaptation is intelligence. The body and the mind do their best to protect us. The only issue is, and yes, friends, there is an issue. The strategy that protects you in one season can end up imprisoning you in another. What helped you to survive childhood may very well sabotage your marriage or any intimate relationship. What helped you to survive horrifying criticism may sabotage your attempts at leadership. You trying to survive rejection can sabotage your intimacy. And then the coping mechanisms that you use to survive chaos can sabotage your ability to build trust in people, systems, all of it. And this is what ends up happening. The avoidant person then recounts these things. I will not need or ask or reveal, nor will I be dependent, exposed, embarrassed, rejected. I will not risk. I will not risk. And for a while, you feel like you're pretty damn powerful. You've got great control of everything. It feels like you're an independent, high-functioning individual. However, the actual cost is that no one can reach you. No one can support you, correct you, work with you, know you, trust you, or even love you. Because what you think is protecting you is actually a prison. Avoidance is armor. And the only time that armor is useful is during a battle. However, if you wear your armor to dinner, to bed, to meetings, to friendship and parenting, business development, and to every single emotional interaction in your life, eventually, the armor is no longer protection. It's now isolation. And you're not a medieval relic. You're a human being. You need more than defense. You need connection, discernment, clarity, and, courage. You got to be brave to break out of those patterns, because you do risk emotional upheaval. So how does this happen? Why do people develop avoidant behaviors? There's several common reasons why they do. And it's not about, listen, it's not about blaming parents, your exes, your bosses, your childhood, or an entire council of village idiots who failed you. That's not what this is. I'm a firm believer that every parent makes some mistakes when raising their children. Okay? That is a given. That is every parent makes mistakes somewhere. No one is perfect. Okay? However, as adults, we should be able to reflect upon the things that were like generational bullshit, call it out, and then work with the next generation to make sure they don't do the same shit. Because then all we're doing is literally replicating the cycle and making more fucking idiots. Why would we do that? Y'all hear me talk about my dad all the time. I love that man with every cell in my being. He also made mistakes. I know that while he was the best father I ever could have asked for, he still made mistakes. I made mistakes. Shit. I made a fuck ton of those. Jeez, my mistakes made mistakes. Okay? Seriously. So it's about calling them out, having that conversation, and going, listen, when I did this, when I told you don't cry in front of other people, that was wrong. Your feelings are valid. Go ahead and cry. But don't do it for too long. You got about 10 minutes. It's not going to help the situation. Let's get down to brass tacks and figure out how to fix it. Okay? So I'm not trying to blame anybody. I am calling out why this has happened so you can make it stop. And you don't perpetuate it upon someone else. Right? Right. That's what it's all about. It's just understanding the pattern so that you can stop being governed and ruled by it. So, why does this happen? Emotional needs were dismissed, minimized, or punished by someone, whether it be a parent, sibling, spouse, partner, doesn't matter, boss. Okay? So they learned early on that emotions don't create connection. They create risk and inconvenience. Things like saying, you're too sensitive, stop crying, you're being dramatic, that's not a big deal, you're fine, don't start your shit, go calm down. I don't have time for this shit. And why can't you just get over it? Okay. Over time, someone hearing those statements begin to believe their emotions are too much. Or my emotions make people leave, criticize, or shut down. So they start managing their emotions, their feelings privately. Privately means silently. Silent means invisible. Invisible looks like I don't have needs, but you do. You can sit here and tell me all motherfucking day you don't have needs, but you do. You a liar. You bury them. You call it character, being tough, being strong. Mm-mm. Mm-mm. Nope. That's not what it is. The emotions still exist. That's why you have them. And we all have them. Okay? So that's one reason. Another reason can be that they were rewarded for being low maintenance. Low maintenance. That one's kind of sneaky. Some people become avoidant because they were praised for never needing anything. So do you see how, as a parent, you can do things that would make a child develop avoidant behavior, and then you're going to fucking praise them for it afterward? That's wild to me. You're literally cementing that dysfunction. When things are said like, you're so mature for your age, you're so independent, you never cause any problems, you're so easy, you're the strong one, you handle everything. You don't need help like other people do. Oh, that sounds so positive. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it is positive. But if a person only receives approval when they are useful, quiet, undemanding, productive, and emotionally convenient, they may learn that approval and that connection is conditional. I'm only approved of, accepted, and lovable when I'm not a burden. So they become allergic to needing anything. So they don't ask for help. They don't admit fear. They don't say anything when something hurts. They don't tell anybody if they're feeling overwhelmed. And they don't reach out when they're struggling. They perform competence until that's what hides them. And competence, is beautiful. I love competence myself. It's one of my favorite currencies. But competence without vulnerability is an expensive costume. Okay? You can be capable and still need care. You can be strong and still need support. You can be independent and still desire connection. You can be respected and still be emotionally honest. Because yes, my friends, confidence crushes chaos. Confidence is not pretending, however, that you never feel anything. That is not confidence. That's avoidance. That's avoidance. Okay. Another reason why people will develop avoidant behavior patterns, because conflict was unsafe. When conflict means yelling and punishment, abandonment, stonewalling, the silent treatment, humiliation, or generalized chaos, those environments will make even just a normal disagreement or discussion feel dangerous. And so their body won't interpret this conflict as needing to clarify something. Instead, the body interprets it as, we're under attack, evacuate the premises. They shut down, they walk away, they change the subject, they make jokes, they become cold, they become logical to the point of emotional vacancy. And they say, I don't want to argue, even though the other person might not be arguing. The other person may have been just trying to repair something. And that matters because avoidant people often mislabel emotional engagement as conflict. When somebody says, I need to talk about what happened, the avoidant nervous system says, you're about to be trapped, blamed, controlled, and emotionally mugged in a dark alley. So they leave, sometimes physically, sometimes emotionally, with silence, with sarcasm, with too tired. This again, you're making a big deal out of nothing. Unresolved conflict does not evaporate because one person refuses to participate. It actually ferments. And then everybody wonders why the relationship smells like shit, like resentment and old socks. Another reason that they'll develop avoidant behavior patterns because vulnerability was used against them. They once opened up to the wrong person. They trusted someone, shared something tender, admitted an insecurity. They expressed a fear. They revealed a desire, or they asked for reassurance. And that person mocked them, betrayed them, dismissed them, weaponized it, I should say, abandoned them, or treated their vulnerability as a weakness. So now, vulnerability feels like handing someone a knife and hoping that they have manners. And then the avoidant pattern says, never again. And while you can understand where that comes from, the dangerous part is when never again applies to everyone. Because then you're not practicing discernment. It's literally practicing global emotional lockdown. And that's not wisdom. That's fear with a security badge. One other reason is that they fear rejection or inadequacy. The avoidance develops when people carry a strong fear of not being enough. They may avoid applying for opportunities because the rejection would confirm their worst fear. They avoid deep relationships because being chosen feels wonderful. But when someone walks out, they feel devastated. So they avoid a relationship altogether. They avoid visibility because then they feel scrutiny will result in criticism, and that would be unbearable. They may not provide feedback or seek feedback because that feels like condemnation to them. Okay? So they just avoid being deeply connected. Okay? And the person is not simply just avoiding a task. They're avoiding the identity and the identity wound they fear the task might expose. All right? Because if you don't send the proposal, that's safer than sending it and being rejected. Not having the conversation is safer than hearing something painful. Not trying is safer than failing. And you get the whole, situation. Not committing is safer than being left out. Okay? So, avoidance protects the fantasy of possibility, because as long as you do not try, you can tell yourself maybe it would have worked. And that's a dangerous comfort. Potential is a lovely place to hide. But potential without execution, that is empty. It's pretty. It's dramatic. And then avoidance creates immediate relief. And that's the hook. Avoidance reinforces itself because it works immediately. You don't have to answer the message. You don't answer the message, the anxiety drops. Cancel the appointment, the pressure drops. Avoid the conversation, the discomfort drops. You don't ask for help, you're not vulnerable. Yeah. And in the meantime, little voice in your brain is saying, excellent. Excellent. We survived. And the next time discomfort shows up, the brain will choose avoidance again because it remembers relief. Not consequence, but relief. Avoidance gives immediate comfort and delayed consequences. It's like emotional payday lending. Feels helpful today. Absolutely wrecks your credit later. So, what does avoidant behavior patterns do for the person that engages in them? Okay. One thing that we know, it's a pattern because behaviors persist for a reason. People don't repeat patterns for no reason. Even harmful patterns serve a function. Avoidance might be costing them connection, trust, intimacy, growth, leadership, confidence, and peace, but it's giving them something else. And what does it give them? A sense of control. Right? It reduces immediately emotional discomfort. All right? It gives them a way to stop feeling something they don't want to feel. All right? They avoid, anything that threatens the version of themselves that they're trying to maintain. Avoidance actually protects image. If I see myself as strong and I avoid admitting that I'm hurt, I still look strong. If I see myself as competent, if others see me as competent, I can speak English, I swear. They avoid asking for help so that that image remains intact. That's why avoidance is wrapped up in ego. Not arrogance, but identity protection. And the person may unconsciously believe, if I admit that this matters, or if I admit that I've been hurt, I lose power. When I admit that I care, I become vulnerable. If I admit I need help, I look weak. If I admit I was wrong, I become worthless. So they avoid. They avoid feeling because they fear what the feeling says about them and how other people will view them. But feelings are not character defects. Feelings are not a moral failure. Okay? Sometimes the strongest thing you can ever say, I don't know how to do this yet, but I'm willing to learn. And my sweet friends, that is confidence. Not walking around pretending you already have mastery, but building it. Okay? Building it. All right. So now you know what it is. All right. Next week, we're going to audit whether or not this is you, or if you're allowing this to break bread with you at the table. So get out there, share, subscribe, download, follow. Be sure to make comments, send me some, emails, ask some questions. Meet me back here next week for your Hump Day Guilty Pleasure, 5 a.m. Wednesdays for the Salty Goddess Podcast. I'm Margaret. Have a wonderful week, y'all.